Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 763, a Boeing 747-168B, was ready at Indira Gandhi International Airport in Delhi on the evening of 12 November 1996. Its destination was Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. The aircraft was filled with passengers, many of them Indian nationals traveling for work. The flight crew, led by an experienced captain, completed their pre-flight checks. The air was calm, visibility good. The pilots established communication with Delhi Air Traffic Control. The controller on duty, V.K. Dutta, managed the busy airspace. Flight 763 received clearance for engine startup and taxi to the active runway. After a brief hold, the tower gave the final takeoff clearance. The Boeing 747 roared to life, thundering down the runway. Once airborne, Flight 763 contacted the departures controller and was instructed to climb to flight level 140, 14,000 feet. The aircraft began its steady climb, following its assigned departure route. There was no indication of the catastrophic event that was to unfold just minutes later. At the same time, Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907, an Ilyushin Il-76TD, was inbound from Shymkent, Kazakhstan. On board were primarily Russian and Kyrgyz traders. This aircraft was under the same Delhi ATC control, specifically the approach controller. The controller instructed the Kazakh flight to descend to flight level 150, 15,000 feet. This would provide a standard vertical separation of 1,000 feet from the Saudi flight. The Kazakh crew acknowledged this instruction and began their descent. However, the aircraft did not stop at 15,000 feet and continued downwards. Neither flight crew was aware of the other's proximity. The radar system available to the Delhi controller did not provide independent altitude information. The controller had to rely on pilot reports for their altitudes. The two aircraft were now converging rapidly. At approximately 1840 local time near Charkhi Dadri, the unthinkable happened. The left wing of the Saudi Boeing 747 sliced through the tail section of the Kazakh Ilyushin Il-76. Both aircraft disintegrated almost instantly in a blinding mid-air explosion. The debris from the two shattered aircraft rained down over agricultural land near Charkhi Dadri in Haryana. Villagers heard an enormous explosion and saw multiple fires falling from the sky. Driven by fear and a desire to help, many villagers rushed towards the burning objects. The fields were littered with twisted burning metal, and the acrid smell of jet fuel filled the air. Amidst the wreckage, they found human bodies and personal belongings scattered everywhere. All 289 passengers and crew on Saudi Flight 763 perished. All 60 people on Kazakhstan Flight 1907 were also killed. In total, 349 lives were lost, making it the deadliest mid-air collision in aviation history. Emergency services were alerted, but reaching the crash site was challenging. The initial rescue and recovery efforts were largely undertaken by the local villagers and police. The scenes they encountered were deeply traumatic. The fires burned for hours, illuminating the gruesome task of searching for victims. The Charkhi Dadri collision was not just an aviation accident, it was a human tragedy that seared itself into the collective memory of a nation. The scale of the tragedy was staggering. There was no hope of finding survivors. In the aftermath of such a devastating air crash, the focus shifts to investigation. Investigators rely on crucial pieces of evidence, primarily the aircraft's flight recorders, commonly known as black boxes. Every commercial aircraft is equipped with two such recorders, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. The flight data recorder records flight parameters like airspeed, altitude, and control inputs. The cockpit voice recorder captures all sounds within the cockpit, including conversations and radio transmissions. Locating these black boxes amidst the vast debris field at Charkhi Dadri was a priority. Eventually, the recorders from both aircraft were recovered. Though damaged externally, their data cores were intact. The data extracted from these black boxes would prove indispensable. It would allow investigators to reconstruct the final moments of both flights with remarkable accuracy. The flight data recorder would show exactly what each aircraft was doing. The cockpit voice recorder would provide insights into what the crews were saying and thinking. Without these silent witnesses, determining the cause of the collision would have been infinitely more complex. The investigation, led by Justice Ramesh Chandra Lahoti, quickly homed in on a critical aspect: altitude. Saudi Flight 763 was cleared to climb to 14,000 feet. The data from its FDR confirmed it was at this altitude. Kazakhstan Flight 1907 was cleared to descend to 15,000 feet. This should have provided the standard 1,000-foot vertical separation, yet the collision occurred. The evidence pointed towards the Kazakh flight. The Ilyushin Il-76 had cockpit instruments calibrated in the metric system. The Kazakh crew had to perform mental conversions from feet to meters. This process introduced a potential for human error. The investigators needed to determine if such an error had occurred. The question was, did the Kazakh crew correctly understand their cleared altitude of 15,000 feet? The black boxes held the answers to these critical altimeter clues. The flight data recorder from Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907 was meticulously analyzed. Its contents provided a precise account of the aircraft's flight parameters in the minutes leading up to the collision. The data confirmed the investigators' suspicions. The Kazakh aircraft did not level off at 15,000 feet. It continued its descent, passing through 15,000 feet. At the moment of impact, the FDR indicated that KZA 1907 was at approximately 14,000 feet. This was the same altitude as the oncoming Saudi jet. The FDR data also allowed investigators to examine the rate of descent and any control inputs made by the crew. There was no indication of any aircraft malfunction. The aircraft appeared to be responding to crew inputs. The descent profile was consistent and controlled, suggesting the crew may have been unaware of their actual deviation. The next step was to understand the why through the cockpit voice recorder. The cockpit voice recorder from the Kazakhstan Airlines Ilyushin Il-76 provided the human context to the data from the FDR. It captured the conversations within the cockpit and the instructions received from air traffic control. The findings were sobering. A key element was the language barrier. The radio operator communicated with Delhi ATC in English, while the crew communicated in Russian. This chain of communication introduced a point where misunderstanding could occur. The CVR revealed ambiguity within the cockpit regarding the assigned altitude. The pilot questioned whether they were to maintain 15,000 feet or continue descending. The radio operator's response did not adequately clarify the instruction. The pilot, believing he was cleared to descend further, continued the descent. The CVR captured the crew's report to ATC stating they had reached FL 150, even as the aircraft continued to descend below it. The language barrier compounded these issues, leading to a tragic misunderstanding. The Charkhi Dadri collision did not occur in a vacuum. The individual errors within the Kazakh cockpit were primary causes, but the broader environment of Indian airspace management also played a role. In the mid-1990s, India was experiencing significant growth in air traffic. Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport was becoming increasingly busy. However, the air traffic control infrastructure had not kept pace. Delhi ATC relied on primary surveillance radar, which did not provide independent altitude information. Controllers had to depend on pilots verbally reporting their altitudes. This created a significant blind spot. The airspace structure around Delhi was rudimentary, with a single air corridor for both arriving and departing traffic. This lack of segregated routes increased the risk if vertical separation was compromised. The system lacked the redundancies and sophisticated tools common in more developed airspaces. The tragedy underscored the urgent need for modernization. The Midair collision over Charkhi Dadri was a profound shock to India and the global aviation community. It served as a catalyst for change. The loss of 349 lives demanded a comprehensive review of air safety procedures and infrastructure. The Indian government initiated significant upgrades and reforms. One of the most critical changes was the modernization of air traffic control systems. The installation of secondary surveillance radar at major airports became a top priority. SSR provides controllers with real-time data on aircraft identity and altitude. Airspace restructuring created separate corridors for inbound and outbound traffic. Stricter enforcement of English language proficiency standards for foreign crews was implemented. The global push for mandatory installation of traffic collision avoidance systems gained momentum. TCAS independently detects potential collision threats and provides resolution advisories. The Charkhi Dadri disaster led to tangible improvements, enhancing the safety of India's skies. It stands as a reminder of the constant vigilance required to maintain safety in aviation.